Migi and Dali is strange, at least at first, although maybe all the way through. It's a confusing show to figure out, especially at first, because when the first episode came out, I think pretty much everyone looked at it and thought, okay, this is going to be the strange show. This is going to be the one with the creepy twins who do strange things, who are all lanky and awkward and move in unusual ways and try to pull one over on this nice older couple who's adopted them and just kind of be strange, right? I don't think a lot of people expected that much from the show after the first episode. And after I watched the first episode, I didn't really know if I wanted to continue watching it because it seemed like it was just going to be this strange little thing. Right? And why really watch that unless you're into something that maybe would have leaned into some creepy horror elements eventually? Like, I don't really know where people were expecting the show to go. But then you watch episode 2 and things change quite a lot. Because it introduces this plot point regarding Migi and Dali being hellbent on trying to figure out who killed their mother. And that murder mystery basically drives the show through to its end and is honestly the main reason why I kept watching it, because even if the show was still weird, even if it still had eccentric characters, to put it lightly, awkward direction, not particularly great voice acting if you're watching it in English. I think that's because it was actually dubbed by actors who speak English living in Japan. Why that was done, I don't know, but it is a very unpolished English dub, to put it lightly. A lot of that just kind of adds to the sense of the show not quite being right, but the mystery kept me wanting to see more, to at least see, okay, what happened here? And it makes our main two leads more than just these weird, unusual guys. They have a purpose. Everything they do is to achieve this meaningful goal of trying to figure out who in this town killed their mother. What exactly went down? And they don't have a lot of clues at first. They just have their memories from when they were young because their mother died when they were very little. But they get new information, they make new friends and allies, and are able to uncover what exactly is going on and sort of unravel this sort of dark secret that had been festering within the town. And I will say, to some extent, the show did grow on me as time went on, because Migi and Dali do get some decent character growth. They're fleshed out much more than I would have ever expected them to be from the onset, and they do genuinely build good bonds with some of the other people in the town. They make genuine friendships, and it's interesting to see that happen. And by the end of the show, these characters have a fairly nice life. You know, they come to appreciate this older couple who's taken them in, whereas at first, they just saw them as like a vehicle to help them achieve their goals, right? But eventually they find, no, like this is a home for them. These people care about them, they care about them, and ultimately they build a family. They have people who care about them. They have friends who care about them. They end up with a nice life. And ultimately, I think the ending to the show is very strangely heartwarming, which is something I never would have expected after starting the show. That being said, I do think the main plot doesn't quite come together as well as the show probably wanted it to. Mostly that's just because of a few plot points that don't entirely make sense, or at the very least are not explained as well as I would have liked them to be. And that's not the end of the world. I don't think it ruins the show, but it does leave this, awkward feeling at the end that, like, yes, okay, things have worked out. The ending is fairly satisfying, but there are a few things that just don't quite sit right with you at the end of it all. But I have to say, I never expected to feel as positively about the show as I did when I first watched it. That being said, I'm not going to necessarily give this a glowing recommendation. I don't think this is a great show. I don't even necessarily think this is a good show. I think this is okay. I think if you like these characters who are, a bit off, a bit not right in the head, a bit awkward, a bit creepy, a bit weird, if you like that sort of uneasy atmosphere that eventually evolves into something quite a bit more darker as this murder mystery eventually expands and more information is unearthed, you might get more out of the show. But ultimately, I do think its strangeness and its uneven quality in terms of its animation and its English dub, which granted, you don't have to watch it in English, and I don't know if I really recommend that you do. There's enough there that eats away at me and thinks, did I really enjoy the experience of watching this? And to some extent, sure, but there is a lot that I wasn't necessarily a fan of. There were a number of points while watching the show where I thought, all right, I'm watching this because I want to see how the mystery is resolved, not because I'm eager to see it resolved. I just felt like I needed to see the resolution to this once this mystery was introduced, right? You could argue that that's clever because it does keep viewers wanting to watch a show that otherwise they might not have, just to see, how everything is worked out. So I don't know ultimately if it was worth it. I don't know if these characters, even though they do develop, even though there is more to them than meets the eye, I don't know if they are ones I'm going to necessarily look back on super positively just because of how unusual they are, almost at times for the sake of being unusual. And I don't know if, as much as I do think there are some satisfying elements to the ending, if it's satisfying enough to justify sitting through what is otherwise, just kind of a fine show. And there's nothing wrong with just being an okay show, with being like a 6 out of 10 all right experience. And certainly that is much more than I ever would have expected this show to be when I first started watching it. It is definitely an important example of why sometimes you shouldn't judge a show just based on not just, of course, its description and its key visuals and stuff like that, but also even its first episode. Sometimes you do need to watch a little more because you're not really going to know what the show is actually about until you take that extra peek behind the curtains. So ultimately, I would say if you dropped Migi and Dali after the first episode, I would probably try to at least watch the second episode to give yourself a better grasp of what the show is trying to go for. But understand that this is still not necessarily going to be a groundbreaking series for you. Certainly better than it has any right to be, and better than I ever expected it to be, and better than most people expected it to be, but not necessarily a show that I think does enough to justify sitting through 13 episodes. It's all right, but it's not quite all the way there. Thank you so much for watching this video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and as always, take care everyone. Look forward to the next video.